Hello. How's everybody today? Oh my goodness, there's so many people on here already. Wow. Okay. Um, Today we're going to talk about the sweater, and we're going to start talking about the Starry Starry Night Socks and color work, stranded knitting versus Fair Isle, and some other things like that. I have a bunch of stuff to talk about, and I think it's going to be really fun. So let's see who's on here. Tanya from London. Hello, Kelly, my cat. Judy Joyce, Susan Powell. She says it'll be a cool 41 degrees Celsius today. Goodness. Deb Henson, Amy Schmalls, Sylvia Earle, Judy Lausch, Michelle Lindgren, Vera Slikey, Deborah Cisneros. Let's see, it just jumped. I hate it. I must do something that makes it jump. Okay, Diana Danko, Pamela Matthews, Xerix Helix, yay, Luana Hendricks, Nancy Drake, Sherry Thurber, Francoise, hello, Francoise, Lilac for Angels, that's Ruth, Rona, Diana, Carla, yes, thumbs up, Carlotta, Lacey, Renee, Kathy Trykowska. I might have said it right. I don't know. Adriana, Sophie, Jay Hansen, and Vicky, Pat Gordon, Debbie Red Rose Knitter. I love that. Barbara Rickman, Joyce Nugent, Anne Tremolier. Is it Tremoliers or Tremolier? Tremoliers, hello. Anne is helping Francoise in some of the video translations. Isn't that awesome? Yay. Nancy Davis, Cindy McBride. Okay. Okay, it jumps every time somebody writes something. That's good to know. I'm learning. Now, today I did something different that I didn't do last time, and that is after I set this up, and I set it up earlier today, and then I can pick what time I want to schedule it for. And then there's this little button over at the bottom that says done. I pushed that, and I think that's what sends the notification to you. I did not do that last time because I thought if I hit done, it would go live right now. So I'm still learning too. Did you guys get a little notification like an hour before this went on today? If you did, it's because I pushed that done button. It took me a while to figure it out, but I did not go live. So I know that must be what sends the notice out. Okay. So I finished my sweater, you saw that last time, and we're starting the Starry Starry Night Socks. But I want to answer questions first, the written questions from Ravelry first. I also have a book to show you and just some general things to talk about that I think you'll really like. So on the Ravelry questions, Sock Genius said, I didn't answer her question last time, and I didn't. I skipped it accidentally. And she wants to know if she's doing cable A on the sweater, how does she take it down into ribbing? And that's an excellent question. So here is cable A, and it's kind of this honeycomb pattern. See here? So it doesn't really ever come down to legs. So, Jean, what I would do is I would do some decreases. Like when you bring this honeycomb down here, there's 4 stitches of knits at the bottom. These are all knits, actually, with the crosses. There are 4 stitches on those 2 legs. I would do kind of like the cable flare bind off, where you combine those 4 stitches into 2. So those would come down and make 2 stitches in a leg. And then the next 4, which are hidden behind, I would do a purl 1, knit 2, purl 1, combine these 4. I'll write this out for you and send it to you. Is that okay? So I know this one was hard to turn into cable legs. So that hopefully will answer that question. And let me go through these questions. And remember, if you're going to ask me a question over here on the live stream, please preface it by putting question in big capital letters. It's easier for me to find it. Okay, I have the other thing on my screen over here. So then we go to the next page. Okay, this is from Crispy Quilts, and she says she has two questions. One, ITAG, would it be possible to do a video on how to measure a good fitting garment instead of doing body measurements? Yes, in fact, I'm adding that to my list right now. Let me find my ink pen, because that's one of my to-do lists, and I'm going to do that before we start the next sweater. I'm making a new video on measuring, doing the measurements, and I'll talk about this, measuring a garment. I do this all the time. When my daughter and I go shopping, which we don't, like twice a year, we do a major shopping excursion. We go down to Los Angeles. Mostly we buy clothes for her and my granddaughters. And I'll often see things that inspire me to knit. And so what I'll do is my daughter and I, we go take things into the dressing room to try on. I actually lay them out on the floor and measure them and draw. I take a picture with my phone, and then I document the measurements, because then I can replicate it at home. That's all I need is a picture and the measurements. So then I'll do a video on how to do that. It's very easy to do. And I'll also show you how to do like long distance, like if you want to knit something for your son and he lives in another state and you don't get to see him very often, what measurements do you need? Or even if he just sent you the size of his clothing, how you can figure that out. So that's a great question. Measuring a garment. I got that. Her question number 2 from Crispy Quilts is, on the Starry Starry Night Socks, the pattern states it's a lady's medium. What are the exact measurements of the sock? I know those are not in the pattern, so I got my sock out here, and I'm going to measure it right now. Now, the problem with measuring something that's flat, that's intended to be round, like this, and especially because it's stranded knitting, which has a thickness to it, it's a thicker fabric this way than just one strand knitting. When you measure across the work, you're getting the outside measurements, not the inside. So when I give you these measurements, that's the outside measurement. I don't really have a way of measuring the inside. So I'm going to say the leg of the sock that I knit is 5 inches across. I'm sorry, it's 4 1/4. 4 1/4 inches across the ankle. And it's 3 3/4 inch across the base of the foot. The length from the heel, the bottom of the heel to the toe, is 9 1/4 inches. And I will add that to the pattern and in centimeters as well. Okay, so that'll give you that, but those are the outside dimensions of the sock, not the inside dimensions. But that's a great question. This next question is from Susan Marie. It's a sweater question. I have a question about the short rows used to build up the shawl collar. So what her question is if she were going to, the back of the shawl collar, I had you build it up 3 inches, and she wants to know why I chose 3 inches. The reason I chose 3 inches is because the width of the button band is 3 inches. And if you want your shawl collar to fold over on itself, it needs to be twice the width. So if you want it needs to be 6 inches wide this way if you want it to fold in half and be 3 inches. So if you were doing one for a child, maybe you would want to build up the back 2 inches and have this fold over 2 inches, and your button band would be 2 inches. Or for a baby, it might be just 1 inch. So you would build up the back 1 inch, it'd fold over 1 inch, and your button band would be 1 inch wide. Okay? I hope that answers that question. And then this is from Purple Llama on the Starry Starry Night Socks. She said she knitted her first pair of socks last month and has become obsessed with knitting socks. Yay, that happened to me too. While I love looking at stranded knitting, I haven't enjoyed the very limited amount I've done in the past. These socks will give me a new opportunity to learn new techniques and perhaps to see what I'm missing. Yes, and socks are a great opportunity to learn a new skill. Question, I have used the magic loop in the past for hats and socks. Do you suggest abandoning that method for these socks and using the two needle method? If so, can this method be used to knit 2 at a time? If you had the opportunity to watch my video on working small diameter stranded knitting where I use 2 circular needles, you'll see why I use 2 circular needles rather than magic loop. You can't really do that with magic loop. And that's what keeps you from getting crimps at the corners where you change from one needle to the other. So I do recommend 2 24-inch needles. And yes, you can do 2 socks at a time. That is possible. She says also, before starting this knit along, I've knitted swatches with various size needles using the sock yarns I have used so far. I see the lesson says to knit the swatches in the pattern. Will knitting stranded change the gauge, making it advisable that I knit swatches specifically for these and future stranded work? Can these swatches be knitted flat or should I knit them in the round? Fantastic question. So yes, you need to knit them in the round, and stranded knitting totally changes your gauge. In fact, stranded knitting changes your gauge so much that oftentimes you get the same number of stitches as you do rows in 1 inch. They make more of a square stitch rather than a rectangular stitch. You know, standard stockinette, you may get, just as an example, 5 stitches to the inch, but you get 7 rows. So that makes little rectangular size stitches. They are wider than they are tall. In stranded knitting, because you're pulling a yarn behind the back, it tends to pull the stitches in, making them narrower. So oftentimes you will get the same number of stitches per inch as you do per rows. And in many stranded knitting charts, the designs are shown in square. But this is not always true, and every stranded pattern will give you a different ratio between the width and height of the stitches. Does that make sense? So you have to swatch for each one. I'm sorry, but you know, after a while you'll start loving swatching and you need to swatch in the round. So with that question, if you want to go ahead and swatch for your socks, which will actually be the next lesson, but if you want to get a jump start, what I would do is with your chosen yarn, I would start the Starry Starry Night Sock. Just follow the patterns. You cast on 80 stitches and you work the corrugated ribbing it tells you exactly how many rows, and then work about 2 inches of the stranded pattern, and then put your work on waste yarn and block it. That means putting it in room temperature water for about 20 minutes, not less. It can be more, but not less, 20 minutes at least. Then take it out of the water, squeeze the excess water out, blot it with a towel, lay it down without stretching it or doing anything to it. Just lay it out and allow it to completely dry before you pick it up. Once you've picked it up, then you can try it on. Now, the thing about stranded socks or any stranded work is it does not have as much stretch as a regular sock. Here's a regular sock. See how much it stretches? Because it's just stockinette. This is stranded. It has very little stretch. In a regular sock, you would use, the standard is 10% negative ease. So if you measure around the circumference of the ball of your foot, you would subtract 10%, and that is the size that you are going to go for. You want the sock to be slightly smaller than your foot. The reason is that keeps the sock from twisting and turning in your shoe, which causes the sock to wear out faster. You don't want the sock really tight because then that stretches the stitches apart. And if you stretch the stitches apart, they are thinner there and you will wear the sock out faster. So 10% negative ease is just about right for a regular sock. See, it says lots of stretch to it. For a stranded sock, you want 0 ease. So let's say your foot measures 8.5 inches around the ball of your foot, then the ball of the sock should be 8.5 inches. It should match your foot. That's why stranded socks always look bigger than regular sock. See how wide it looks compared to this regular sock? This has 10% negative ease. This has 0 ease, and these both fit me perfectly. Also, in stranded socks, if it were negative ease, first of all, you wouldn't be able to get it on. But second, if the stitches are pulled apart, again, they will wear out faster. Okay? So that's a great question about starting your swatch. Now, if you do that swatch and you block it and everything, and then it fits you perfectly, it's not too little and not too big, that's the beginning of your sock. You can just continue on. But if it's too tight or too loose, then we will talk about how to adjust that and fix that problem. And that is in lesson 2. Okay? So now I'm going to go over here to answer some questions. But I have one thing I want to show you first. You know, in lesson 1, I know you're not all doing the Starry Starry Night Socks, but the things that I'm showing will benefit all of you. In lesson 1, I had you, those are my dogs down there. They're playing. They play so much. They are so fun. Oh my goodness. They love toys. See, these are toys. See them there? They're wrestling with a toy. They do that all day. Okay, so I suggested that you need to have 2 colors of yarn that are opposite in value, right? A light and a dark. And I showed you on a grayscale how to figure that out. So, and then I suggested taking a strand of each of your yarns and putting them in a small amount of water and letting it soak overnight and seeing if the water changed tint or if the color transferred from one yarn to another. So we did that here. This is a sample. My friend Judy did this. This is her white yarn that was not in the water. Here's white yarn and her blue yarn. These were in the water all night long. Now, a very, very small amount of the blue did go over to the white. But this is after leaving the yarn in the water for over 12 hours. You're not going to do that with your socks. On my socks, these have been blocked a couple of times. There is no color transfer. But I only put them in the water for 20 minutes, but they need to be there for the full 20 minutes. You're not going to put them in there for 5 minutes. It does not allow the water to saturate the yarn completely. So, but put them in, set the timer for 20 minutes. That's not long enough for the color to transfer. I also brought this in, which is also similar yarn, and this has been blocked several times. Again, there is no color transfer. Okay, the white is white, white, white. Now, the colors that are more likely to give you transfer are these heavily dyed colors, and that's the really dark blue and really dark red. So you especially need to check those. But if you put it in the water and you leave it all night long, I would expect a lot of color to go to the lighter color if it's going to be a problem. If it's just a smidgen, a little itty bitty bit, slightly tinted, that is not a problem. So you can see that here. She has very light, can you see the light tinting of the blue on that white? Here's her white to compare it with. That was after 12 hours of soaking in the water. If she soaked it for 20 minutes, the white would still look like this. The blue didn't change at all. Okay, that's super important. If the color is going to bleed, it will start bleeding pretty much right away, and you will notice it very quickly. So let's see, let's go over to, those are all the questions that were posted in the Ravelry group. So I can close that now. Yay, okay. Now, let me go look for questions over here. I talked to Charles today, Charles Gandy, and we have set up for him to do a live stream with me on February 3rd. So just put that on your calendar. That's a Sunday. It'll be at 2 o'clock in the afternoon Pacific time. Charles will be on here with me if you want to ask him any questions. Okay. Sherry Thurber says it's her first time live. Hi, Sherry. Welcome to our group. We have a fun time. And Rona says it's raining in SoCal. It's not raining here yet, but I think it's going to. Thumbs up, thumbs up. Carlotta, hi from Houston. Renee from Bakersfield. And Kathy says it's hot and humid in Melbourne. Yeah, they're in the summer now. You know, we're in the winter here. So it's questions, looking for questions. Okay. People said they got notices this time. That's good. Oh, and Susan Powell says, for the first time, I was able to connect to the live stream before you started it and was therefore able to put a comment before it started. Very cool. Question from Susan Murray. How should the notice come out? Email. I don't know. How did you guys get a notice? I don't know because I don't get it. And Carlos is from Mexico. Hello. Hi, Carlos. Delise, hello. Sophie says she gets notifications, but then when you start, the advertising starts. So unfortunately, I don't see your whole, there's advertising first. I didn't know that. Anne Tremolier says, is it possible to keep intarsia cables in 2-color brioche? Yes, and that is on my list too. I've already written that down. That's one of the videos that I'm going to do. You know, I did do one on 1-color brioche. Did I do that? I'll have to look and see. My plans were to do one for 1-color brioche with the 2-color cable down, and for 2-color brioche with the 2-color cable down. It's really interesting how you do it. You're going to enjoy it. It's not impossible. In fact, it's very simple once you think it through. You'll see. So that'll come up. Okay, Pat Gordon question. Which setup is better for the Starry Starry Night Sock pattern? 2 at a time, 2 cable, or magic loop? I would do, if you want to do 2 at a time, 2 cables, not magic loop, because the thing is about, and I don't have that little sample that I made for that video. You need to watch the video on working stranded knitting in small diameter. The link is in the Starry Starry Night playlist group. It's right in there. So I'm not going to be putting individual videos in the handouts, the links in the handouts. What I'm going to do is I'll tell you that I added them to the Starry Starry Night Sock playlist. So you go to my YouTube video and you can either choose videos or playlist. Choose the playlist and you'll see Starry Starry Night Socks. Right now there's only 2 videos because I've only given you 2 videos to watch. As I assign the videos to be watched, I'll add them to that playlist. I'll always put the link to the playlist, but I'm not going to put links to the individual videos, okay? It makes it easier for setting up the written materials for you. But the first link, the one I put this time, that is the QR code, it goes straight to that playlist, as well as the highlighted name. It says Starry Starry Night Sock playlist. It's highlighted. That's a live link. You can just click on it, okay? Let's see. So Pat, you need to watch that because then you'll understand why you need to use the 2 separate circular needles. With 1 circular needle, a magic loop, you can't pull part of the cord around to keep the corners smooth and so you don't get a crimp. You do not want, see, here's the edge of my knitting. This is where the needles changed, was right here. So I had this much on one needle, this on the other needle. And you can see there is absolutely no crimping there whatsoever. And for those of you who've done small diameter stranded knitting, you know what I'm talking about, that when you change needles, when you strand across the needle, the strand gets really tight across the corner. Some people even suggest knitting inside out to prevent that. But if you use my method of the 2 circular needles, you can use 1 needle to pull it all the way around and pull the fabric out to the side so that you prevent crimping the corner. Okay, so watch that video. It's worth watching. This is from Susan Powell, Starry Starry Night Sock question. While doing the stranded pattern in the 2 colors, is it possible or too complicated to make just one of the stars in another color using intarsia? That's a great idea, and I was actually thinking about that myself. It is not too complicated. It means in that area, you're going to have 3 different colors. You'll have to strand across the one that you're not using that you should have used, that's going to be carried. You'll have to catch it in the back and then work intarsia. So you would do just like I'll make a video. Let me break that down. This is an awesome idea. So fun. So intarsia stranded in the round. Okay. That was a great question, and it is possible. If you think about it, these are the exact type of things I exactly love to figure this stuff out. It is so fun. Adriana, question. In Ann Budd's book, when referring to the increases for the V-neck, she says increase 1 stitch at each center front. Where what is the center front? Is that the very first and last stitch? Yes. So when she on page 75, when she's having you divide the stitches into sections, she has you knit a stitch and then place a marker. And then you work some stitches for the first shoulder, right? Well, that 1 stitch before the marker, that's the front stitch. At that point, there's only 1 stitch at the front. As you make the V-neck increases, the front will get wider and wider, but it's always at that edge. You are absolutely correct in what you're thinking. Good question. Terry Stegmiller. Question, would you please provide recommended needle information for each step of the sweater? I'm up to the button band collar and have no idea what to use. Do I use one really long circular? You can. Probably a 36-inch needle would be fine. Because that wasn't really a pattern, it's a tutorial. I'm not going to tell you exactly what needles you need in the beginning, because as you go along, you'll see which needles you need. If you can't fit all of the stitches onto one needle, you're going to need a longer needle. But then again, on most of the sweater, you can use a 24-inch needle. Let me see if I have one here. Here's a 24-inch needle, okay? And I could do my whole sweater on this one needle. But when you get to that shawl collar, that's too many stitches. Then I did use a longer needle. The reason I like to use a 24-inch needle is because when I'm knitting, the bulk of the sweater is right here. And the parts that I'm working on move from one needle to the other, and it moves around like this. And there's a lot of stitches down here, and it is heavy. But I only have to move the stitches around here, and I can do that easily by going like this. If I use a longer needle, which I don't have one here to show you, the needle hangs down further, and your work gets spread out more, and you spend a lot of time moving your work around the needle. And I don't like to do that. I like to have my work all up here concentrated, so I can just move these down, move these up, move these down, move these up, okay? So I only use a needle that's long enough to put all the stitches on. I don't use one that's longer. Okay. Kit Henry, question. Starry Starry Night Socks. Can I size these down for my small size 6 foot? Yes, we're going to talk about that next week when we talk about the swatch. I would still knit a swatch based upon the directions for the sock as it is written. And I would knit the ribbing, the corrugated ribbing, in about 2 inches. Now, first of all, this gives you practice in corrugated ribbing and in stranded knitting, so you kind of get your feel for what you're going to be doing. It gives you an opportunity to learn how to manage 2 circular needles and avoid the crimping at the corners. And then you can see how it's going to fit your foot and how much you're going to need to change to make it fit your foot. And that's when we'll start talking about how to change it, okay? There are times when you can just go down in needle size for a sock. That's one thing you can do. I would not go up in needle size, though, if the sock is too small. Instead, I would add more stitches, because when you stretch sock fabric, if it's stretched more than what it's intended to be, do you see how the stitches pull apart there? Then that will wear through faster. You don't want these to wear out. This is a lot of work. You do not want these to wear out. Okay? Sarah, question. Can I use a 9-inch circular needle? You can, but it's not enough cord to pull around to avoid. Well, I see. Try a 9-inch. Try it. You wouldn't need to pull it around. Just try it and see if you like it. If you like working on 9-inch needles, this could be absolutely perfect for you, okay? That's a great question. Thank you. Okay, let's see. Let's see. It jumped. I'm sorry. Okay. Barbara Rickman, question. Starry Starry Night Socks, will you discuss in the other lessons when to knit the patterning for larger legs and a longer sock? Yes, that's exactly next time. We're going to talk about, in the pattern, did you see that there's a wide leg chart for people with bigger legs? But we'll talk about how to adjust between the two. Yes, there's lesson 2 has a lot more information than lesson 1. Lesson 1, the most important thing is getting the correct yarn. The rest of it means nothing if you don't get the correct yarn. So I wanted to do the yarn stuff first, okay? Grammy Luli, question. On your thumb gusset video, fingerless mitt, you add 3 backward cast on stitches on what looks like the back needle. Not sure why you didn't put on front needle. Could you explain? Because I want to put them on the needle that I just used. It's not necessarily the front needle or the back needle. I put them on the needle where the working yarn is coming from, which should be the needle that's in your right hand. And then you add your 3 stitches to that. Why do you add 3 stitches? Because we used those 3 stitches at the bottom of the thumb gusset and they went into the thumb, right? So if you finished your thumb and you have it on waste yarn, correct? And you're ready to go back to working the hand. You work across the back of the hand. You're at the point where you're going to add those 3 stitches. They have to come from where the working yarn is. And you need to put them on the needle that is in your right hand. Then when you start the next is working across the front of the mitt. Okay, so then you come back around to those 3 stitches and you'll be able to work them. So at the very bottom, I don't have my thumb gusset hand, my pattern here in front of me, but when you start the thumb gusset down here, you remove 3 stitches from the whole round of the hand, and those they grow out and become the thumb gusset. So when you get back up here to maintain the diameter of the hand, you have to add those 3 stitches back in. If you don't, the hand will be smaller than the wrist. And you can see plainly that my hand is not smaller than my wrist. So you need to add those 3 stitches back in. That's what that is about. Susan Marie, Starry Starry Night. From the wide leg chart, it looks like the cast on will be greater. Yes, so you just have to count across the tops of those 2 charts. There's 2 wide leg charts, a front and a back. So you count all the stitches across, and that's how much your cast on would be. For right now, for the gauge swatch, I would just do the 80 stitches, okay, and do your little gauge swatch. You're just going to do a few inches because you're going to do a swatch no matter what, okay? We're going to do a swatch. Do the 80 stitch one because then you'll be able to get your stitch gauge from that. You'll see from that and then your leg measurements, whether you're going to need the wide leg chart or whether you just need to add a few stitches to what you already have. So I know you're thinking ahead and you're anxious and you want to get going. Just wait until Tuesday and that'll come out, okay? If you want to be a step ahead, just follow the sock directions as written, not the wide leg, and just knit a little swatch, okay? Knowing that that's going to be a swatch, but it might turn into your sock. That's the bonus. Okay. P. Chambers wants to know, what is my Ravelry group's name? It's called Knitting with Suzanne Bryan. Anita Johanna Drost says, greetings from the Netherlands. Hello. And Champ Smith says, it came over as a notification on my phone and I was able to connect with the notification. Okay, people are telling the weather. Okay, Jay Hansen says, my notice was in my social heading in Google Mail at 3 o'clock, but I was sitting on your YouTube and it came live as soon as you said hi. Pamela Matthews says, my 2 videos sold her. She's using 2 24-inch needles for the socks. I'm also going to do 2 at a time. Great. Tanya, question. Starry Starry Night, can you talk about the durability of the fibers mentioned in lesson 1? I need to buy my yarn before next week. Yes, I will. To make the fiber durable, these are the things that you need. you need to have 3 or more ply, and it needs to be a very tight twist. On top of that, I actually prefer wool. Wool mixed with other things is okay. Wool with nylon, wool with cashmere, wool with silk, those are all fine. There's a very popular yarn base called MCN, which is merino, cashmere, nylon. It's 80% merino, 10% cashmere, 10% nylon. That is fine in fingering weight. These are all fingering weights. But what makes your yarn the most durable is going to be the twist and the plies, not the fiber. And then the third thing that makes durabilities for socks is tight, small stitches. So you want to work it on the smallest stitches. You want to work the smallest stitches you can. Now, remember last time I talked about wraps per inch? You could go down to a triple aught, but your stitches aren't going to get smaller. So you go down to this, and for this I used a 1.5. Now I'm re-knitting this, and I have it somewhere. Maybe I didn't bring it in here. Oh, yes, I did. It's right here. I'm re-knitting these socks. This is mine on a 2.25 millimeter. These were knit on a 2.5 millimeter. These fit me perfect. I'm doing the same thing on a 2.25 millimeter, and in a couple inches, I'm knitting my swatch. This is my swatch. I'm going to, starting with the ribbing, I'm going to knit the stitch pattern, and then I'm going to try it on. And it may become my sock, but it might be that it's too small because I went down a needle size. Okay, so I'm learning too. I will always be knitting right along with you because then we're all in the same headspace at the same time, okay? This is 80 stitches. I usually cast on. The reason you want 80 stitches is because, now for me, I usually cast on 60 stitches. 60 stitches works fine with just plain fingering weight yarn in a standard sock, okay? On these, 80. Because there's not, stranded knitting allows no stretching whatsoever. It's like woven fabric. See, I'm pulling on this. See, it doesn't stretch very much. So there's not going to be any ease. It needs to fit. And if it is tight, you do not want it tight because first of all, it cut off your circulation. But the second thing, if it's tight and if you do stretch these stitches out, see how I'm just starting, I'm pulling really, really hard. But if it were tight like that on your foot, this would wear out really fast. Take a look at store-bought socks. Look at how small the stitches are. And then put it on your foot and see how it fits on your foot. And they last a long time generally, if you get the right size for your foot. So that's what we're trying to recreate here. We want really small stitches and we want it to just fit your foot. This is stranded knitting. Stranded knitting has different stitch and row gauge than regular knitting. For example, in a regular sock like this is the same. This is on a 1 needle. On a 1 needle, I get 7 stitches to the inch. On a 1.5, this is 2.25 needles, 60 stitches, I get 7 stitches to the inch. This is a 2.5 needle, 80 stitches, I got 9 stitches to the inch. I got more stitches to the inch on a bigger needle because it's stranded knitting. Because just like I was talking about before, when you do the stranding restricts the stretch, and it actually makes the stitches closer together. So when you would normally get, here's the stranding on the inside of this sock, okay? That stranding causes the stitches to be slightly closer together. So instead of giving 7 stitches to the inch, I got 9. And actually, if I had knit this on a 2.5, I probably would have gotten like 6 stitches to the inch instead of 7. So I'm getting way more stitches per inch here on a larger needle. So the sock is not that much bigger. It needs to be a little bit bigger. It needs to be about 10% bigger. Do you see that? In order for it to have 0 ease and to fit on your foot perfectly. It should not be stretching, should not be constricting, and it should not be loose enough to twist around your foot. Okay. Kelly, my cat, said she tried 2 cables for the first time and she really liked it. Jilly Lynn said she missed the start, but you can go back and watch. This is all recorded. It'll be on YouTube. Pat Gordon. Question, why would block an item more than once? Well, for one thing, when you wash it, you're going to block it, right? So it won't hurt it to be blocked. Blocking is just washing it. Blocking is getting it wet, laying it out, and allowing it to dry. That's what blocking is. Blocking does not mean stretching or changing the shape. Now, when you do block lace, that's a different story because you want to stretch the fabric for lace. But a lot of people confuse blocking lace with other blocking. When I knit sweaters, I do not stretch them in any way because if you stretch it out, guess what it's going to do after a few days or a week or two? It's going to come right back in. So that's something we talked about in a previous video. When you knit your sweater, you need to knit it to fit. And that's why we do so much swatching, so much blocking of our swatches in advance. And you trust your blocked swatch because you want your sweater to be your size when you're done. If it's smaller, which is usually what happens, is it'll be smaller rather than bigger. And then people say, well, I can block it to fit. Sure, you can stretch it while it's wet. You can make it any size you want while it's wet. The knitted fabric, when it's wet, is very pliable, very malleable. You can just really change the shape of it. And it will stay that way for a little while after it's dry. But over time, it will go back to the size it wants to be. So every time you put that sweater on, it's going to get smaller and smaller till it goes back to the size that you actually knitted it, which will be too small. So blocking does not mean stretching, except in the case of lace, okay? And question, is it possible to add your video avoiding holes underarm to the ITAG Raglan playlist? Oh, thank you. I will do that. Let me write that down. Add underarm video to ITAG. And if you see any other videos that need to be added to that list that you think are beneficial, just let me know. I really, really appreciate that. I have so many videos, and I in my mind, I pretty much know all the ones I've done, but to tag them to each other and connect them to each other sometimes gets out of control for me. Eric Joseph says, I prefer knitting in the round on 2 cables as well. I'm knitting 2 sleeves in the round for the moment. Yes, and you can knit 2 sleeves at the same time on 2 24-inch needles. Whoa, let's see. Let's see. Okay, there I go. Notice comes up on iPhone screen. Okay, so Mary Inman said she got a notice on her iPhone screen. So if you're on your computer, I don't know where the notice goes. D. Lion, question. Hi, Suzanne. First time asking a question. Can I wet block a 100% acrylic cardigan? Yes, you can. But I don't know how much change you're going to get. Now, the newer acrylics are really, really nice. They're very soft. They're lovely to work with, but I haven't had much experience blocking them. Has anybody else on here had experience blocking them? If you have, speak up. I don't generally knit with acrylic, although when we did our red poppy project, I knitted a lot of red poppies in acrylic yarn. So Joyce Nugent's question was skipped. It's at 12:10. I can't see them by time, Delise. I'm sorry. Joyce Nugent. Let me go through and look for Joyce. I'm sorry. I'm just looking to see if I can find what her question is. Oh, no. Castanha, that's not a question. That's her, but not a question. Let's see. Joyce, question, is it feasible with the shawl collar to make it more narrow, 2 inches? I am so petite that the 3 inches will overwhelm my frame. What are my options? Yes, you could make it 2 inches. Just do that. It'll be fine. And then you'll get it fold over. You'll have 5 inches, so you'll get about a 2.5 inch fold over on your shawl collar. That'll be fine. Okay, so let me go back down to where Dolly said that. Okay. Okay. Priscilla. Hi, Priscilla. Priscilla is one of my translators. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. Lauren, question. Hi, Suzanne. I love your videos and your Facebook page. Could you do a tutorial on how to pick instead of throw for people starting color work who want to hold in both hands? I do have a video on that, and that is one of the videos that's linked in the sock. Just go to my YouTube page, which you're on, go to playlists. And in the Starry Starry Night Sock playlist, there's a video, and I show how to hold the yarns from people who've never done stranded knitting to the more complex. So I first showed not holding the yarn at all, just laying it down and picking up which color you want to use when you want to use it. That's how most people start who feel very uncomfortable working with 2 yarns. And then I show how to hold 2 yarns in one hand, 2 yarns in the other hand, and then 1 yarn in each hand on that same video. So you can take a look at that and try them all out, see which one you like. And those are not all the ways to, that is not all inclusive. It's just a starting point for you to experiment with how to hold your yarns. Okay. Judith says my video on blocking was very helpful. Thank you. Thank you. Hello from Scotland. Hello, Helen. Question. Trying to learn how to knit sweater for 4-year-old nephew, but getting lost in the round. Can I do in front and then back and then arms? Yes, you can. I actually prefer, if it's not stranded knitting, I actually prefer working sweaters in pieces and seaming them together. But I come from a sewing background. Actually, I learned to knit before I learned to sew, but I did so much sewing that I think about knitting fabric. I think of it as pieces of fabric, and then I seam them together. It's perfectly okay. You can transfer any pattern that's knitted into the round to in flat, and most patterns that are knit flat, you can change them to be knit in the round. Okay, that's a good topic for a video too. Judy Joyce says, my mom always blocked all of her acrylic sweaters she knitted. So she wet blocked them. Thank you, Judy. So there you go. I would try wet blocking your acrylic sweater. Yes. Or socks. Ellen Reniger, I just tuned in. Did you answer the question about where to measure for big legs? We're going to talk about that next week, about measuring your foot. Sandra Pinkerton, blocking answer. Yes. Can wet block acrylic. Thank you. I had best results soaking the item and then steaming. The stitches straighten and plump beautifully. But you want to be careful about not over steaming because you can kill it. And then it has a lot more drape than what you might be expecting. Okay. All right. So now I have some other things to show you. I'm sort of caught up on all the questions. Last time people asked me if I actually wear these, and I said I've worn them a couple of times because I actually feel more like framing them and putting them on the wall. But I have knit other socks that I wear that are stranded knitting. This is a pair I've worn a lot. You can see some little places, little balls of yarn here. I've worn these many, many times. They're a little bit felted right in here. Can you see how it's a little bit fuzzy right there? And I've washed these lots of times. Now, when I say wash, this is how I wash socks. I take my 2 socks, I put them in a glass of water, and I fill it up to the top. I put like 1 drop of dish soap, not detergent, soap in. I actually fill the glass about 3/4 full with water, put the 1 drop of dish soap in, spin it with my finger. I don't want soap suds. I just want the soap to disperse in the water. Then I put, oops, somebody's here. I think it's the mailman. I put both my socks down into the glass of water and push them down. I don't go like this. I just push them down and you'll feel all the air bubbles come up. And once the air bubbles have come up, I leave them in the glass and I let it sit there all night long. Then in the morning, I take them out, squeeze the water out, run them under running water to get the soap out, squeeze the excess out. I don't go like this. I just squeeze one time, I roll them in a towel, and then I lay them out flat to dry, and they come out perfectly clean, no agitation. I do not put them in the washer and dryer. And I know one time we talked about that. Remember, we talked about superwash versus non-superwash wool and whether you could throw it in the washer and dryer. So these I've worn a lot. And this was a good choice of two colors. Can you see? I used, this was Cascade Heritage, the dark brown, and this was some stranded color work. I mean, a hand-dyed yarn I bought somewhere that had the pink and light green and the off-white. So they go well together. This pair I've also worn a lot. Again, you can see, you don't see too much because it's pretty tight here, but this, you can see there's felting here in the toe. I've worn this pair a lot. It has a similar foot as the Starry Starry Night Sock. This is, and you can see it's a little bit felted at the top here where my shoe rubs on it right here. But other than that, it looks pretty darn good, and it's been washed many times. This sock has a problem though. Although it's really, really pretty, the background color is the same brown that I used in this sock. It's actually the other half of the skein. It's exactly the same. The foreground color had all these different colors of blues, but some of the blues were the same value as the brown. And so see how you lose parts of the pattern? They just disappear. Can you see that? See down here where you see this whole star here? Up here, there's portions of the star missing, aren't there? That's because the blue is the same value as the brown. Look at this diamond here. The bottom half of the diamond is missing, and it's blue. One's blue and one's brown. It's two different colors, but their value is the same. So your eye just blends them together. Now, it looks interesting in this sock, and it turned out okay. I mean, it's really pretty. But I learned a lesson from this sock. You need to have different values between the two yarns that you're going to use. Okay, here's another one. Now, oh, also, I would call this stranded because it's just two colors, but one strand is multicolored, but it's still just two yarns. Okay, this is stranded. This is stranded. This is Fair Isle because the foreground, they're separate yarns in here. The orange is a multicolored orange, but the blue, this blue is solid, this blue is solid. This is the same brown yarn, that Heritage brown, that's the same brown yarn. Then this yellow. So I have the dark blue, the light blue, the yellow, the brown, or maybe it's purple. It's not, it's a purple yarn. And then the orange, which was variegated. This is Fair Isle, and both the foreground change and the background changes. Okay, so this is why there's a difference between stranded knitting and Fair Isle. In Fair Isle, the colors actually change. The strands of, actually the foreground stays the same. I'm sorry, I misspoke. The foreground the whole way through is the orange, and the background changes between the other colors. This pair I've also worn. You can see on the heel where it's worn a little bit here. See that? But see how small the stitches are? So it wears very, very well. Also the toe, you can see some smooshing between the yarns here. Here's the beginning of the round. Do you see how this line here is here and then it moves up there? So the beginning of the round's on the sole of the foot there. So I do wear those. This is another pair. This is mosaic knitting. The one color is gray, and the pink didn't bleed into it. It's just my color choices. The one color is gray, the other color is red, and it's mosaic knitting. But still, mosaic has, you know, it's similar to stranding in that you have strands going across the back of the work, so it makes it thicker. I've worn these a lot, and I made these a long time ago. They're fuzzy. You can see the fuzz here on the bottom. I designed these. This is one of my designs, and I put the gusset on the bottom. See that? So that the mosaic knitting would go all the way around the sock uninterrupted. That's when I was playing with where do you put gussets in relationship. And this is where one of my shoes wore on it. See there, it's kind of fuzzy right there. It's my shoe was rubbing on it there. So anyway, that's about stranded socks, Fair Isle, and whether the socks are durable or not. All of these socks are with 0 ease. You can see how big they are. Nope, that's a mosaic. See, they just look big, but when you try it on your foot, it fits absolutely perfect. So let's see if there's any questions about that stuff. Have you published the look of the new ITAG sweater? I would like to start to look the yarn. Have I published the look of the new ITAG sweater? I'm not sure what you mean by that, Nancy. You might need to restate that. I'm sorry. Pamela Matthews, question, what are the pattern names for those 2 socks? I don't see them in your patterns on Ravelry. This one was, both of these designers took their socks off of Ravelry. I didn't design either one of these. This was called My Estonian Sock, and this one's Boxes or something. They are in my projects. If you go to my projects on Ravelry, both of these socks are in my projects, and I linked the patterns to them. So if you can get the pattern now, if it's available, they'll be linked. If that designer retracted their pattern, it'll still show the name, but the link won't work. These maybe were my all-time favorite socks to knit from somebody else. Oh, no, these were my favorite. These are my favorite. These are from Lisa Schroyer, and this was in, I think, Interweave Knits. Okay. Pamela Mashes, never mind, I found them. Yes, you found them on my project page. So Nancy Rees, you said, have you published the look of the new ITAG sweater? I would like to start to look for the yarn. It's called It Takes a Guild, and I have published it. It's on Ravelry. So if you we use ITAG because it's just faster to say than It Takes a Guild cardigan tutorial. But that's what it's called on Ravelry. It's It Takes a Guild cardigan tutorial. Now, I had some other things I wanted to talk about. Oh, we were talking about stranded versus Fair Isle. Remember, you've seen this a bunch of times. This is Fair Isle. This is where the foreground and the background both change at the same time. That's what defines Fair Isle, is the colors change. You never use more than 2 colors in a row, but they change over time. Whereas Scandinavian knitting, you get stripes of designs. This blends. Do you see how it blends? Now, sometimes they'll blend an area and then they'll have what's called a piri, which is a divider across here. But between those two, the colors are blending. And then they might have another blending section up here. I chose to blend my whole sweater, but this is still Fair Isle. Oh, something else I wanted to talk about. I do have a book. This is called Alice Starmore's Charts for Color Knitting. This is a great book. And if you find out from knitting this sock that you like to do stranded knitting, this is a good book to have in your library. Now, she does not tell you how to, there's not projects in here. It's just charts. But in the very beginning, which is really cool for those who are doing level 3 of the Master Hand Knitting program, in the very beginning, she has the first chapter is designing patterned sweaters. And she gives you layouts. Okay, and she talks about whether you want an all-over design or you want stripes, just like what I was talking about, and different ways to organize your pattern selection. And over here, big motifs versus little repeating motifs, stripes, or something going down the center. Then she talks about each one. So that was the large motifs. And then she talks about how to plan your sweater and schematics and how to take your measurements and figure out your schematic. And she does that for each style of the sweater. And she talks about positioning. How do you want to position over the center? You know, you don't want it off center to one side or the other. So depending on, see how she centered this motif? It's centered to this square. You want to center it to your neck. She talks about all this. Okay, but what I'm sharing the book for is all these charts. Okay, so look at this one. This one's pretty cool, isn't it? You could substitute any of these designs for my star in this sock, and in the next lesson I'm going to show you how to do that. So if you do have some charting books at home, you can pick any design you want and substitute it for the star. Isn't that cool? I'm going to actually do that. These are my Starry Starry Night socks that I'm starting, but I'm going to use a different design. The sock will be the same. The bones of the sock, these are the bones of the sock. The bones of the sock are the corrugated ribbing, the stripe coming down the side, the arch expansion, and the sole. This part in here, you can put whatever you want. And again, you need to center it. See, I've centered it. And what's cool, in fact, I wanted to talk about this. Why is there a stripe here? And many times in mittens and socks and small and sleeves that are small diameter, Fair Isle or stranded knitting, you will see a stripe, won't you? Because if you don't have a stripe where you have the beginning and the end of the round, it will jump up. This is, oh, I didn't bring that sock in here. I have a sock that shows that. I'll show you next time. Also, it allows you to choose way more stitch patterns. For example, if I didn't have the stripe, I would have to choose a stitch pattern that would work perfectly over 80 stitches, right? That's not so easy to do. That narrows your choices down tremendously. But if you put the stripe in, the stripe divides the front from the back, and you can end the stitch pattern anywhere. Just butt it up against the stripe. In fact, you can see this star and this star aren't even, they're just next to each other, but they're not the same. They're not balanced sideways, are they? Oh, this is the beginning of the round. You can see how this star is one row higher than this. Can you see that? So if they were right next to each other, that would be very, very obvious. The stripe hides it. It's a camouflage mechanism, okay? So you can substitute anything in here that you want for stranded knitting. We're not talking about cables or lace or other stitch patterns, but if you want, and you can even just Google stranded knitting charts, and you don't even have to have a book, just Google stranded knitting charts, and you can put anything in here that you want. Now, if you don't feel brave enough to do that, that's fine. I'm not challenging you to do that. You can do this. This is a gorgeous sock, you know, so you can just knit this. But if you really are one of those people that like I am, I'm always trying to think, okay, what can I do different? Then plug something else in. Try it, okay? Now, let's go back over here. Oh, and Tremulio, schematic is the boss. Exactly. That is my new saying. The schematic is the boss. If you have your body measurements, and even your foot, we're talking about a foot here, okay, for a sock. If you have your body measurements and you make a schematic, which we can make a schematic of our sock, you can knit anything. You can knit anything. You can knit a hat. You can make a hat schematic, measure somebody's head, subtract 10% ease so the hat will stay on their head, and you can knit a hat. That's all you need. And you can put any stitch pattern in there that you want because you're going to knit a gauge swatch, right? And you'll know from your gauge swatch how many stitches you need to have to fit the head. So let's see. Oh, Susan Powell, I think Nancy means the new ITAG yoke. The new sweater that's going to come up, that's going to be called, we're doing our yoked one next. It'll go on sale on February 15th. It's not on Ravelry yet. It won't go on Ravelry till February 15th. And then I'll put it up and you'll just get the introduction at that time. You will not get the whole pattern. It's going to be just like this time. It's going to come out in segments, section by section. Okay? Let's see. Kathy Bailey says, is stranded knitting the same as intarsia? No. Stranded knitting, the definition of stranded knitting is using 2 or more colors in one row. Fair Isle knitting is using only 2 colors. You can never use more than 2 colors per row. In stranded knitting, the big definition is 2 or more colors used in the same row. For example, boho stickning uses more than 2 colors many times in the same row. Intarsia only uses 1 color at a time, but you work up to a place and you drop that color, or you have to link it with the next color, which is part of the intarsia technique, and then you work the next color. So you're only working with 1 color at a time. I have a video on beginning intarsia if you want to take a look at that. Okay. Suzanne, I'm doing a practice sample of Starry Starry Night Sock. My band is curling. What am I doing incorrectly? Your band will curl a little bit. See how my band is curling? Until you block it. Okay, it's just going to do that. That's how it is. Don't worry about it. Thank you, Delise. Thank you, Ellen. Hello, Wicklow, Ireland. That's Sarah Wahlberg. Okay. Now, if you want to buy yarn now for the ITAG yoke, look in Ann Budd's book. This is the book of handy book of top-down sweaters. Go in here, go to the section on yokes, figure out what size you want to make and what you think your stitch gauge is going to be, and she'll tell you how much yarn you need to buy. Also, last time I showed this also has the yarn requirements in it. And you can buy this from the Interweave website. Go to Interweave, and it's actually on sale right now for $3 something. It's usually $5.50, and it's on sale for $3.99 or something. Any other questions? So it was good to see you. I'll see you again on Sunday at 2 o'clock Pacific time. I'll send out the notice in advance. I'll try to send it out a little earlier. And I'm going to get off now. I have an appointment at 1:30, and I need to get ready for that. It's been very fun today. I think we've been very constructive. We've covered some very interesting information today. And it's just going to get better. And everything that we're talking about for this sock, you can use for any of your knitting. If you want to get into stranded knitting, keep following along, because all the things we're going to talk about on the sock, you can use in general for stranded knitting. Give me a thumbs up. Thumbs up. Right now, there's 138 people on there, and there's 54 thumbs up. 58 thumbs up. So you guys have a good day. I love you all. You make me a better teacher. Thank you. That's priceless for me. Thank you. You have a good day. Happy knitting.